So Donald Trump has just announced tariffs across the world as part of his Liberation Day. Now this has obviously thrown the political debate into chaos with lots of people venting against Donald Trump. But what's this really all about? Look, my take is this. This is more than just one man. This is more than just one president. What the tariffs and Trump 2 ultimately reflect is an ongoing, increasing opposition to the economic model that has presided over the West since the 1990s, an economic model that we might call hyper-globalization. And what is this economic model? It's rooted in two things: economic globalization and cultural globalization. Economic globalization is essentially the deregulation of markets, the liberalization of finance, and forcing nation states to open themselves up to much greater trade competition and supposedly free trade from other parts of the world. Now, when this economic globalization was first advocated in the 1990s by the likes of Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, and lots of international institutions, a global elite if you like, the argument was that this would lift all boats. But actually, what economic globalization did is it created unfair trade practices which countries like China exploited. The argument that this would lift all boats was quickly undermined by evidence in economics, by some renegade scholars who showed that actually, in this new era of hyper-globalization, it was the working class in Western states that got absolutely smashed apart as jobs, resources, and basically economic power were redistributed and sent away to developing nations in parts of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and so on. And the big losers in all of this were Western workers who not only lost their jobs and had their wages squeezed, but as lots of studies have now shown, they were more likely to fall into alcoholism, more likely to fall into drug abuse, their marriages were more likely to break down, and this led to what scholars like Angus Deaton and others call deaths of despair, particularly in former industrial heartlands in places like the Midwest of America, the Rust Belt, and also in the northern England, the Red Wall, and places like northern France, because these workers could no longer compete. So economic globalization basically gutted lots of these communities. And the second key problem with this model was cultural globalization, that by its nature, by its internal logic, what hyperglobalization demanded was the constant supply of cheap labor, cheap migrant labor, by the way, that kept businesses' costs low, kept their profits high, and meant they didn't have to innovate, they didn't have to invest in improving training for their workers, they didn't have to improve their working practices and conditions because they could constantly rely on ongoing supplies of cheap labor. Deliveroo, Uber, Just Eat, these are the classic examples whereby workers have very few rights and they're essentially treated pretty badly, and you can see the dire effects this is having on our society. So cultural globalization really went hand in hand with economic globalization by saying we need mass uncontrolled migration, we need to liberalize borders, we need to basically remove border security, and all of this is to serve the interests of large global corporations who are basically in alliance with a sort of socially liberal progressive elite who like migration because they think they're morally righteous, they think they're morally superior to everybody else. And global corporates obviously love it because it helps the bottom line. But what Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and many other people, thinkers, academics, scholars, countercultural writers like myself have been arguing for much of the last 20, 30 years, that this economic project, hyperglobalization, wasn't working out. Free trade, when it is genuinely free, is usually a good thing for countries, but this kind of corrupted free trade, where the system is rigged against nation states like America, is not good for anybody. And that's what's fundamentally driving Trump's reaction to global markets. That's what's driving his preference for tariffs. That's what's driving his America First economic policy. This is about national preference, putting the interests of American workers and the interests of American firms first. So that's why you're going to hear a lot more during this Trump 2 term about things like reshoring, encouraging companies to go back to America, ending offshoring, the practice of allowing large corporates to move into tax loopholes and to not pay any tax, not pay any contribution to the national communities that have supported them and to the people who have supported them by working for them. Because remember, global corporations have no sense of obligation, have no sense of loyalty to the nation state. Only nation states have a sense of obligation and a sense of loyalty to their own people. So amidst all the hysterical reaction this week and what you're seeing in response to Liberation Day, just remember at its core, actually, what Trump is really symbolizing, more than just one presidency, is this broader critique of hyper-globalization and an economic model that really wasn't working out, especially for working class people in Western economies and societies. Now, don't forget to hit like and subscribe as usual. Don't forget to join us at mattgoodwin.org. Political newsletter goes out 3-4 times a week. It's almost always free. Come and join us over there if you're interested in having a bit of a different countercultural take on your politics. See you soon. Bye-bye.